Welcome to tonight's live stream. All right. Tonight is the first of the month. So pretty cool to have wrapped up a whole month of streaming, even though it wasn't every day. It was the first month of streaming consistently throughout this whole process of creating a comic book. And today we're going to be doing something more at ground level, so to speak, right? So lately we've been doing a lot of rendering, a lot of illustration, putting a lot of frames into the comic book and so on. I'm going to take a step back, and now that I've tried every single different type of format and seeing how things are kind of tying together, I'm going to start organizing my assets a little bit more towards the production of the actual comic. Now that I have an idea on how I'm going to tackle all these different aspects, right? A lot of experimenting has been going on. So just more fine tuning moving forward and setting up template files that I can actually use to move forward in production and not start anything from scratch, right? Almost cover my bases with everything that I need. So today we're going to be setting up a photo studio in Blender. So Photo Studio Season in Blender to just render out the different assets that I have going on with this project. Uh, we're first going to start out with some modeling and setting up the scene, some little tips and tricks about how to just set up real basic objects in order to, and proper camera composition so that even though each render is going to be simple, it's going to be well put together. Then we're going to move into lighting and textures. So real simple usage of just 3-point lighting, a key light, a fill light, and a highlight, and then placing some textures that can tell us a bit of how the light is behaving in the scene. Next, we'll finish off with compositing and a technique I use to render out several cameras at once, which is really, really useful whenever you just want to drop an object and get standard views all the way throughout and just hit render, walk away from the computer, come back, you have 5 or 6 renders done. We're going to be using only the Blender default features, so no plugins for me this time, which is rare if you've been following with the streams. All the way to rendering this full set, and we're going to basically cover all our bases with what I think is important or fundamental to product rendering and Blender, really is what we're doing. All right, so let's just get right back into it. We're going to go into view here where we have Blender. And this is what your default file looks like. So we're really starting from scratch. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to delete the point light there. We're going to keep our camera. Everyone just deletes everything, but this time I'm doing a little bit different. I'm going to actually change this cube in order to set its origin at the 3D cursor. So the default file of 3D cursor is at 0, 0, 0. Right? So I want to set the origin of this cube to the 3D cursor. Origin to 3D cursor right here. And right, what I failed to mention is a better way to do this actually is to go to mesh plane, right? And now that we have our origin at the center of that surface, just a quicker way than looking with the cube, I think I was getting confused with the program there. And then we're going to tap into edit mode and we're going to get into etch mode, start selecting 3 walls, right? And we're just going to extrude those up with E and then Z to make sure it goes up. And we'll type in, I think the default cube is 2 meters. I'm not mistaken, probably 1.1. This is going to change anyway. I'm going to have to stretch this. We'll do the 1.5 meters there to get a box. And we'll tab out of that. We're going to get into our modifier. And we're going to hit button. If you can't tell, what we're doing here is we're setting up a cycle. So we just pick how much offset we want on the side. So I'm going to make it actually minimal, 0.1, and then just increase your segments. I'm going to go to 15. It's nice and smooth. And for the render, this is where we're here. Ultimately, we're going to subdivide this. We're going to go ahead and hit subdivision, simple, and hit it with 2. So it's still just 3 faces, 4 faces, actually. But we're using modifiers in order to get a little bit more infused at this. I'm actually going to go ahead and ask it to, not simple. We want to do 1 subdivision at simple. And then we want to actually duplicate our subdivision and set the other one to Captain Clark. So you see how we get our corners getting cut up there? So in order to avoid that, we can just hit more, well, more subdivisions and simple isn't really the right way. I'll do Control R, Tab, Control R, so that I can place a loop cut and then just snap it close to the edge over here. There we are. So now we have our sidewall all set up and looking good. Maybe increase the subdivisions down here on the Captain Clark version. And we'll render out 2 subdivisions. I'm just going to actually increase my bevel from 15 to 20. A bit smooth out. There we go. So we have our main geometry. And the next thing is we're going to bring in our sphere. So we'll go ahead and hit Mesh. We'll go to our UV sphere. And we'll see here that our radius is 1. We're going to make it 0.25. And then since that's our radius, right, we can hit G, Z, and use that radius, 1.25. Oh, sorry, 0.25. So that it moves up and the bottom of the sphere is just barely touching, or is really touching it. And we'll do the same thing for the sphere that we did for the, we're going to do for the cube. We'll go ahead and do set origin and origin to 3D cursor. So the origin of this object is towards the bottom. I just had to do this sooner rather than later because I can always go back and hit origin, set origin to the center of volume, and I can snap back to the center of the sphere. But in this case, if I need be, I have my origin right here. So that if I scale it, it's going to scale according to its origin, meaning I can keep contact with the bottom plate as I scale this. Cool, so we have our geometry set up. Now we're just going to set up our camera. So I'm going to look straight on. I'm going to Control-Alt-0 to move that camera that we left in the default over into our main view. And now we're going to go over to our object properties here, and we're going to change all these rotation values. So for Z, we're going to put 90. For Y, we're going to put 0. And then for X, we'll also put 90. So we have a camera that looks perfectly straight on into the cube. And we'll move it along the X-axis to capture as much of this cube as possible. And we'll save it. And we'll save into wherever it is that is useful to you. And I'm going to go into my Lightstream folder. And there it is. Label it Studio Scene. All right. Now that we're saved, we're basically wrapped up with setting up an initial scene. We're just going to create all our other cameras. So I'll do Shift-D to place another camera up in the top view. Okay, hit Control-Alt-0 again. Oops, actually, before I do that, we got to make sure that in the Layers panel here, we make sure that we click on the green camera here to set that as the active camera for the copy camera. I'll go back at the top view, so I can leave my other camera alone. Do Control-Alt-0. Same thing here, we're going to tweak the rotations, so it's all evened up. So 0, 0, 0 in this case, and we can actually move maybe a bit closer to the objects. What I'll end up doing is actually, for this one, I'll zoom out. I'll show you a neat trick to, well, it's not a trick, it's really just a way to fill in all this empty space that is in this scene. We'll have to tweak the scene a little bit later once we set up all our cameras. Or tweak the cameras, depending on what it is that we want to show and how we want to show it. But I'll copy this one again. And this time I'm going to go into the side view. So I'll click, or I'll rotate my way over to the side view, Control-Alt-0. And the way that we can get this camera past this wall, which is sort of jank, but it works, is to just scale it down and move it into the space. And we can catch our side view. We need more space, right? If it's like just too close to the objects. For this camera, what we'll do is actually move it outside the space and go into its object properties. right here. Just kidding. I had it open here in the camera settings. I'm thinking of the overall clipping view. But we're going to change the clipping start of this camera to a value that cuts through. Basically, we won't render anything that is within this distance of the camera. So that way we're cutting through the wall, and we'll be able to see what's on the other side. Very nice. I'm also going to, at this time, turn on, under my viewport display, turn on composition guides. I'm going to use thirds, center, diagonal, and short. We can use one of these golden ratio ones. I'll use the X's on the sides here. Okay, so this way we can move our camera up and actually place the bottom in the lower third, subject in the upper 2/3. Cool, we have our side camera now. It doesn't have to be scaled down anymore. That's just to get a better view of it within the space. Now that it's outside, it doesn't bother me as much, but I didn't want to have a lot of camera lines just flipping through the whole model, which is why I moved it or scaled it that way. It's just for visual purposes. Moving forward, we have our top view, our front view, our side view, and then we'll get a nice little angle view. We could also do a pure axonometric. Forgot to duplicate a camera. We won't do a true axonometric. We'll do kind of a forward angle, something like this, and Control-Alt-0. And for this one, we will bring the clipping start down once more, so that we can see. Oops, I have the wrong camera selected. So selecting this camera, move down the clipping start, so that we don't clip out what we want to see in the scene. RXX rotates the camera up and down, and then RZ, which is normal Z, rotates it, around the Z-axis, so you're spinning around. And that's not bad right there. Circle fit right between those lines. Now we're going to need more circles. So we'll do Control-Shift, or Shift-D, sorry, to duplicate Y, move it along this axis. We'll do that once again. Shift-D, Y, move it along this axis. The reason why I'm not arraying it is because we'll put this back to 0, 0, 0. Sorry, before I tell you why I'm not arraying it, but it's because we're actually going to apply a different texture to all of these. I just moved them all back to 0, 0, 0, so I can move one in positive Y, 0.4, and then the other one, negative 0.4. Maybe that's the other direction. There we go. That fits good on this camera, and I can start clicking on all these over in the views panel, layers panel, so I can see what each camera is looking like. So for example, this one for the subject, I think even though I might get it sideways, I could just rotate it later, but it's going to be better to rotate the camera on the Z-axis 90 degrees, so it captures this. I'm curious why I have to move my position to 0, 0, 0. I was wondering why the sidewall wasn't centered, except for the Z-axis. We'll keep the height where we have it. And that clips perfectly into the cycle wall, at least on one axis. All right. Now we have our geometry and our cameras set up. Last thing before we move on is to rename all these. So we have to rename our cameras. We'll do front view. And then we're actually going to put an underscore and another letter. So we'll do F for front. And I'd like to use uppercase. And there's a very good reason why we're doing the underscore F. So do that. We'll do this one for side view, underscore S. And we'll do over here, this one is the top view camera. So we'll call it top view underscore T. We just can't use letters L or R. Trust me on that. And for this one, we'll go with our perspective underscore P. Okay, select all your cameras. and hit M, and call that collection cameras. Okay. Next, we're going to rename our spheres. So the one on the right, we'll call it metallic sphere. The one in the center, or the one on the left, we'll call glossy sphere. And the one in the center we'll call our matte sphere. Matte as in M-A-T-T-E, not matte as in matte data. All right, and we can name our cycle. Cool. We have everything set up. We can call this first collection our main scene. We did our geometries and our cameras. All right. Moving on, we're going to do lighting and textures. So, real simple. First, apply our textures, because our textures are going to tell us a little bit better how we should be doing our lighting. So, with our front camera selected, the camera view, I'm going to select this first sphere, go into Material Preview, hit a new material here in the Material Properties section, and call this one Matte, as in M-A-T-T-E. And we're going to bring the roughness way high up, not all the way to 1, but close. We'll turn down our specular on this one. And besides our roughness and our specular, we can leave this one alone. We'll keep it white. We can turn it to light gray. Some of that the grayness a little bit so we don't blow out our highlights in comparison to our glossy and our metallic. So the first one set, we'll go on the next one, we'll hit new, we'll call this one glossy. And for base color, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to click on the center one, and so I can color it the same as my matte. I will copy the hex code right here, Control C, put it back over here, select the white, and paste the new hex code right there in for the base color. Then we go down to our specular. We're going to turn that up a little bit. We're going to bring down our roughness, not all the way to 0, close. We're going to add some more sheen to that one. And we can add, not too much, but some clear coat. Okay. Finally, for the one on the right, I'm going to call this metallic, or some people like to call it chrome. That's better for you. And for chrome, it doesn't much matter where you put your base color. If anything, we might switch to black, but we turn our metallic all the way on. And then we bring our roughness down quite a bit. No clear coat, no nothing. We want to put the roughness actually just a little bit higher than the glossy one. So it's not like a pure mirror. And we can leave it alone for anything else. So the next step would be to add some modifiers to these. So we get more faces. We'll do a Catmull-Clark subdivision. We'll bring it up until we get a smooth sphere. So 4. And then I'll just select the other 2. And then holding shift in order to select the chrome ball last, or the one you apply the modifiers to. And then Control L to copy those modifiers. So now they're all nice and smooth. We have one ball that's completely flat in texture, one that is sort of white but has nice reflection going for it, and then one that's just pure reflection, right? So we have an HDRI going in this scene, which is where we move on from, well, before we move on from textures, let's texture our side wall. We'll do a new texture for the side wall. We'll call it, we can just call it paint. When you keep it white, we're going to actually use the shader editor for this one. So a little intro for the shaders. That's selected. We're using our paint texture over here. We got this whole thing to play with. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to bring in a not an image texture, a noise texture. And if I hit Control Shift click, I can just plug in this texture or into the material output so I can see what that's looking like. That's pretty good on there. So what I'm trying to find here or create is some inconsistencies in the paint. And maybe your first reaction is like, well, I want to really show off the object, right? Don't I want just like a clean plate of a background? Yes and no. I mean, it depends what you're going for, but what I'm trying to achieve here is to make my object look really, really good. And in order to make it look really good, it helps to make it look more realistic, more photoreal, right? Just brings up that level of realism, can just kind of trick you into appreciating the thing more like it's a physical object, right? Because once you feel like something is physical or like you can interact with it, it just takes on another quality to it. But up to you. I like to do that with my renders. So I like to put in some imperfections in whatever I'm using as a background to bring in that new level of realism. So with that noise texture set up, I can actually use this on the roughness value for the main texture. So Control Shift click on the main texture. And it's subtle here, right? But there are some inconsistencies happening with the amount of reflection that the wall is giving out. In order to illustrate this a little bit better, I'll use a color ramp, put it in between right there. But things using Shift A and then just searching for what I need because I find that searching is always more useful, even when following tutorials, you just search for what they're using. So if I increase, if I put these closer together, I create basically what I'm doing here is creating a bigger contrast with the color ramp. If I use a noise texture node, I add in the noise. The color ramp brings out that contrast, makes it more intense. So the roughness and reflection of this surface is exaggerated. So you can see here it almost looks like there's puddles all over it. So that's what we're doing with the noise texture. But I want to play with the color ramp now, spread these out, and just create some slight inconsistencies. This is where we can actually start seeing what it is that we're rendering. So besides the material preview, I'm going to go into my render engine, and Eevee is going to do okay for now. Rendered, it's happening because I only have a gray color as a background. So I'm just going to bring that up. Or in fact, rather than bringing that up, I'm actually just going to make it pitch black and go with a single light. So I'm going to go with an area light, move that up. There we go. We just have a flat light on our scene. We just kind of check out how these nodes, how these textures are coming out. So I want to find an angle here where I can see right there. If I place the light there to see the reflection of the light on the surface, I can see how these imperfections are coming through onto the surface. And the whole point of this is really just to create different tones of the color. Right? So if I change colors, that inconsistencies in the paint, as though someone actually painted it, this elevates the whole scene with a real easy trick. Right? We can bring this back to white. Well, I do like how we can see what's going on. Maybe I'll just keep it like that until I have all my details set. Okay. Next thing would be to add a little bit of displacement. So besides the color changes, we will also add another noise texture. I'll hit Control Shift click so we can see what this noise texture looks like. And I'm going to make this one really tiny by increasing the scale. So it makes it look like really detailed stucco. Right, that's kind of what we want to achieve with the noise here. We can, fiddle with the other effects. I actually want less or more. I want more detail, a little bit more. If I were to keep these black spots that come out, then it's more like a really like popcorn ceiling type of displacement that we're about to see. Basically, we're going to make a displacement map, and also use the roughness here to make it softer. And again, I can use a color ramp to tweak this even further if I end up needing to. What we're going to do with this is paste it into a displacement node, and the displacement node, I always mess this up. Do we put the alpha node in height or in scale? I think we put it, let's try both. put it on height, and this way we learn once and for all, it's on video. Plug that into the displacement, the final texture. And here I may want to, well, I'll want to apply a normal texture. I can see how it's working. But I might also want to switch to cycles to see a displacement. Cycles. And use the GPU to render, so it goes faster. You see that not much of anything is happening. And if I change the scale from 1, not much else is happening. So I figured plug this into scale and then change the height to make it more dramatic. What's also going to affect your displacement is what subdivisions you're working with. If I increase the subdivisions, the displacement is just going to look better. Maybe I'll take this last one up to 4 for the final render, and I'll turn it down once I satisfy what I see here. And it's really subtle, again, right? But maybe if I disconnect it, you'll see what I mean. We're looking at the floor right here. Actually, perhaps what I should do is use the color ramp to make it more drastic. And just lower the size for a second so you can see what it's doing. So we have these spots here, right? Basically what's going on with this one. And the displacement is to be pushing these black spots lower and the white spots higher. So you actually create inconsistencies in the wall. You could also do this with a bump node by putting the bump node into the normal tab over here. The normal node. If we look at that texture now, oh, we don't plug it. So we plug bump into normal, but we want to plug the actual color ramp into strength. Or no, sorry. It must be height. There we go. Yes, it goes into height. So now we can really see it happening with the bump. It's creating that texture on the wall, but I'll actually tone down the strength. So it's very, very subtle. So I can look right here at some parts under the sphere where the sphere is casting a shadow on the floor. And that, I think that is enough. Real soft. I'm hoping you're seeing something there on YouTube. And Twitch, I'll go to denoise, and I'm definitely seeing it on my screen. I mean, if I ramp it up really strong like that, that's not what I want, especially on the walls. It ends up being too much. I think like 0.3, no, not even. For the floor, I had it more. But for the walls, I'm just getting too much of it. So 0.99, that's even lower. 0.4, 0.05. All right. So with those values in place, I could also use that color for, now we know that it's height, and place that in for displacement. So again, we want to tone it down here from the full level. So in this case, it would be scale rather than strength. We'll just take that down to 0.2. Or 0.1. Nope, I think the color ramp itself is just making it too intense. We're going to work without displacement for this one. But if I really wanted to exaggerate that piece of geometry and make it more consistent, displacement definitely starts to even actually change how the texture is put together. But for this one, I'm just going to go with the bump. All right. That is pretty much it for texturing. Now we'll do the lighting. So we just put a fill light. We want to have a fill light, which is a light that will evenly help out the whole scene. I'm going to split this over so we can see both. What I'll do with the fill light is actually just make it really soft. So we want it to just barely give us an overall sense of the shape of the objects and the things of the scene. And when the floor is white, it will bounce up some light at the object as well. I'll lower the spread of the beam here, the light settings as well. So as you can see, if the spread is at 180, right, it's a really, really soft light that goes everywhere, but I don't need the light to hit the top of the wall, at least not the fill light. So if I lower the spread to more of a direct light, and I just want to lower the spread enough where my objects are getting lit a little bit more, and the top of the wall isn't really getting much light. And there we have our fill light. So I'll just hit Shift D to duplicate it. New one. I will hide, selecting that main light, I'll hide it, and I'll take my other light so that I can tweak this one on its own. And this light typically is on the same side that the camera is on, but off to the side and angled at the objects. The reason why I'm lighting the left is I also want to see what it looks like from the perspective camera. I think from the perspective camera, getting your shadows going off to the right, and having the key light hitting the front face of the object, which would be on the left, I think that's really, the proper side. If I were to put it on the other side, just to see that quickly from this camera. Right, that to me doesn't look as good, because it's coming from the same direction as this camera, right? Like pretty much exactly where the camera is, which is a little weird. And then throwing the shadows back, so you don't see any details of the shadows we're casting. So I'll undo twice or 3 times. And here, I know I'm going to get a lot more detail out of my objects. Okay. Then we want to turn up the intensity of the key light. We want the key light to really show us some good detail and texture on the front of the object. And we want to cast some real sharp shadows. So to do that, we'll lower the spread even more than what it was for the fill light. There's some cool sharp shadows going there. And you'll notice as I lower the spread, the shape of the light is getting smaller, right? All the way sharp is a completely sharp light that mimics the shape of that light. So if I bring it up, right, but I still wanted to fill the rest of the scene, I would change the size of the light. Now we see the size getting bigger. I don't want to make it too big, and I want to move it a little bit inwards too, so that it does light a little bit left, where at least the light doesn't get cut off by the left wall and creates an awkward shadow. Just get the shadows right. And have it hit a little bit off to the side. And make sure that this light is high up and then pointing down at the objects. There we go. Finally, duplicate that one. We'll get to our highlight. So I'll hide one of these, and the one that I just duplicated is right here. I'm going to use as a highlight. And a highlight is meant to just work opposite, typically, from the key light. And from the front view, let's say, or even from permanent view, we want this light, or I want this light, to be really small. And if not all the way, like solid, pretty dang low, right? And the reason for that is I want to just catch a certain part of the object, like to really just call out its shape, like really specifically. So I'll move this key light down so it can hit my objects. There we go. And the key light will probably, the highlight will have to change with every model to really call out, different parts of the model. So for this one, actually, I won't make it as intense. Like for furniture before, I've used the key light to say like create a real harsh highlight on a silhouette of certain parts of like say the back of the chair. Or if the legs aren't getting that much light, have it hit the legs directly from the back, so you get a little, you brighten up the legs, but then you also call out their shape. So for this situation, I might just have it hit the bottom of the spheres, since they won't get much light, and I'll lower its intensity really low, just like that, so that it's just giving me a little glimpse of the underside of the spheres, right? I might even move it forward. There we go. So I like that U shape I'm getting on the chrome. I don't want too much on the metallic one. And I like how here I'm getting like a little quarter of the sphere, and here a quarter of the sphere again, only a bit softer. So now we turn on all our lights back on by hitting Alt H. I'm hiding everything we added to the scene. And we take a look at what we did. So the key light is a bit too distracting. So this is where we start tweaking each light so that they play nice together. So the key light is either too large or too harsh. So I might actually increase the spread of the key light. There we go. And I'll make it softer, just a little bit, so that I can increase my fill light's size and possibly increase the spread and increase the power, so I fill out the whole box a bit better. There we go. Now I make sure my objects aren't blown out. So this one's getting that nice underlit situation. So I'll turn that down even more so that it's just barely noticeable. So really low. 50 milliwatts, I guess that is. There we go. So soft. But it just brings in that extra, little interesting thing, little interesting break on the shadow of the sphere. Maybe even lower, like one. Yeah. So you might not think it's doing anything, but let me hide it and show you that it actually, in fact, is. If I hide it, I just get, a normal sphere, which cool. But again, I'm not always going to be rendering spheres. I'm going to be rendering different objects. So if there's a harsh shadow, or different objects that are modeled with more detail, right? But if there's a harsh shadow that the object is giving itself, and you can't really see some of the detail underneath, like this type of highlight can really help bring some of those details back. And so we see how it's behaving on a matte object, and we still get a little bit, just slightly, on the chrome ball as well. All right. So we did lighting, we did textures. What's up with this texture? Did I put the displacement back in? No. The bump is just too strong. I thought I had set it lower. There we go. Another way that we're going to hide the bump is something that now we can get into, which is going to be two things. So, first thing is what's going to hide the bump is the depth of field. So we always want to lock into an object. So I'll select this camera that we're looking through right now, and I'll look straight at my subject, which is maybe like right in between these spheres. In the camera settings, I'll go over to depth of field, focus object is going to be this center sphere. Right? Boom. So now I'm just focused onto that sphere. And if I turn depth of field off, if I start to see any detail on the wall come back, I'm going to find an area that has some detail, so say like up here. Okay, so we have that detail. If I turn on depth of field, that detail is gone. Right? And you're like, well, it seems a little redundant or pointless to add detail and then take it away. But it's really not, because what you're doing is you're adding imperfections that are then showing through the simulated camera blur as well. And there's no better way to fake what's in the background than to actually, just do it. If it were just blurry, but it were still just a smooth, white color, it's just not, it doesn't read for real, it even reads more, not real. But if you have imperfections, and you have those imperfections show through an optical effect, again, it just brings it up, it makes it that much more convincing. Okay, so we'll add a depth of field for all our cameras. Well, some of them might not need it. Like if I go to the top view, won't need it. If I go to this one, we'll do the same thing. So set our depth of field to that object. And for this one, what I'll do is actually I'll have this camera focusing on a particular part of the object. So I'll lower the f-stop on this camera until I really start to lose focus. So now at point 2, even my subject is out of focus. Oh, I think I might have accidentally clicked on the sphere on the left. No, I clicked the map sphere. Well, it looks like this sphere is more in focus, but either way, I'll just start bringing the focus back up slowly. So we see here, like the chrome ball is out of focus, but then over here, we're totally in focus. A little bit higher, bring back some of the matte. And yeah, just add a bit more depth to it, a bit more photorealism. So those two cameras are the ones I'll do a depth of field for. So now we'll move on to how do we render out all these cameras together. We'll do over here, use a little trick called stereoscopy. And stereoscopy, what it is when you watch 3D movies and you're looking through a red lens and a blue lens, and you have red and blue images overlapping each other in the theater, but then one lens picks up one color, the other lens picks up another color, your brain puts that together as one image. That's what this technique is for. What we're going to do is switch to multi-view and use multi-view to basically say we have a bunch of cameras that are rendering one view, and we want to render all the cameras. So this is why we weren't using left and right. I just find that even when you get rid of these or you rename them, the camera suffix is set to L and R. So that's why I didn't want to use L and R as a suffix up here. I just typically find issues just messing with that default. Maybe that's been fixed with an update, but last time I set this up, there's going to be a lot of issues to use left, L, and R just because left and right are the default cameras or, set up in a stereoscopy, even though they're not actual cameras in the scene. Either way, we hit the plus button over here, and now we have a render view. So the same thing, I'm going to call this the top view. We'll go view by view. So the top view, and then the camera suffix is _T, right? So we're going to set for the top view. Add another one. We'll call that side suffix S. Add another one, perspective. You go down the list. Camera suffix _P. You got to make sure that you use caps or lowercase for the suffixes as you did above. Front, I'll do the camera suffix F. All right. So it's not working yet because, as you can see, we don't have cameras overlapping. If it were working, we should be seeing multiple cameras here. And the reason we're not is because we also need to name the green camera down here the same as the camera above. So I'll double click on the orange icon for camera just to get into the name editor and then paste that into camera. Okay, and with that done, when we look through the camera, we should be seeing the stereoscopy effect. Let me see what happens if I change the suffix to R. And then one to L. Oops. Yeah, no, typically you see the cameras overlapping. And this is not working for me at the moment. Let's see what happens when I hit render. It actually is working, but it's not giving me the preview. All right, we got everything back. If I hit render with stereoscopy enabled, camera front view F is not a multi-view camera. Excuse me, yes it is. I got my suffixes going. What am I doing? right, left, front. I feel like there's always something so dumb that makes this not work. This is not the multi-view camera. Well, I'm gonna have to look up this error. This is not the first time I run into it. It probably won't be the last. But it is frustrating. Because I set this up as I should. Maybe if I turn it off and on. Maybe if I close Blender and reopen it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I can actually bring up a file where I did have that set up, but I'll have to do that in editing. Oh, there we go. Closing and opening it worked. This is what I should be seeing, is this red and bluish thing going on. So yeah, I guess it's still a glitch. Now when I hit render, camera T is not a multi-view camera. Yeah, definitely an error going on. Because I'm getting my blue and red in the background there, as you see, which should be happening only when I look through a camera. I'll look into this and report back when I edit the video. But yeah, this is the worst I've gotten this glitch so far, because it visually looks like it's working up here, but then it just doesn't want to recognize these cameras as multi-view cameras for whatever reason, even though they're all named properly. Thanks, Blender. Video short. I'm gonna have to go straight to the compositor. So in the compositor, we'll hit use nodes, and for using the compositor, we actually do need to render out one view. So we'll continue using our front view as our reference. Render that. Oh, right, now I have multi-camera view. So I'll turn off stereoscopy and render that. Yeah, when starting with a blank file, by the way, you always have to go down to your performance and make sure you're using tiling. I like to use 512. And also max samples 4,000, that's a little extra. But yeah, definitely way too extra. It's taking too long. We're gonna do 600 is more than generous. Same thing for live. And denoise is on, open image denoise, all this stuff is set. Okay. For this, what I'm trying to get across in this video, the render settings aren't going to do that big a difference, save for the ones that I'm about to explain. Actually, I'm going to have to re-render this because there is one thing that does make a huge difference, and that is the color management setting. When we go down into where it says sRGB here, we're going to go from Filmic to Filmic Log. And I like to set the look to very high contrast. What this is basically doing is mimicking a camera sensor, but then actually setting it to very high contrast, I just find brings out some detail back. Even though it looks very washed out, which is the point of using Filmic Log, if I didn't use very high contrast, we'd be seeing that. So, Filmic Log mimics a camera sensor. We'll do very high contrast. Hit render just one more time. And as we get this image, I'm basically going to do now in the compositor. Where'd you go? Is use these nodes to basically do some Photoshop edits right within Blender. So basically, we could use these node systems to blur, brighten, modify colors, etc. And it automates it into every render that we put out, which is really neat, really useful. So one of the main things we want to use, if we go to color, we want to use color correction. We want to use, was it color balance? Yes. And there were a few others. Converters, I mean, there's so much we could use, but these are the main ones that we want to start off with, color correction and color balance. So now that we have our render finished, I can close out that window and make sure that I can preview my render here by using a viewer node. I'll just drop in a viewer. And I mean, already I can see the render down here, but if I plug the image into the viewer, I can now get it as a background to my notes. And if you want to resize it, was it Control X, Alt X? No. You can go over here to View, and you can do Zoom in or Zoom out with V and Alt V. And then you can move the backdrop by holding Alt and middle mouse button. So V to zoom out. I'll use Alt and middle mouse button to place it right there. See a larger version of what it is. You can zoom in a little bit more with Alt V. That's good. And Alt middle mouse drag. So, color correction. We'll just plug this in here. Make sure we're getting it out to the viewer. We don't have to worry about the compositor for now. We have our color correction going, and this changes a lot. So if I even move this from 1 to 1.1, it doesn't seem like it changed much. But you'll see like from 1 to 2, the image gets much more saturated. So we do want to bring up the saturation a little bit. So I'll do the 1.1. And then I'll actually bring up more saturation at the shadows. So a little, and then a little bit of a boost to, but less in the shadows, to the midtones. The reason for that is you tend to see more color where there is less light hitting, I find. Or at least that's a certain style that I've kind of found that adds a bit more realism. Something I've mimicked from a lot of photo references is that I tend to see that the same color will just be more desaturated where it's getting more direct light. So here we can control that by using highlights, midtones, and shadows. And we can up the contrast. Again, this changes the image a lot, but since I am shooting basically as mimicking a raw format camera, I'll up the contrast just slightly, like from 1 to 1.05. Even that's too much. We'll do 1.01. Yeah. And you can continue to tweak this, as you see fit. Gamma, you might want to bring that up, so on and so forth. But actually, what I want to start doing now is go to the color balance. And what's nice here is if you hit offset, power, slope, that's the real key to combining this with the filmic log setting, where you're basically mimicking your camera sensor. Because this method for color correction should actually come before the color correction, should actually come after the color balance. So here in color balance, for our power, we'll bring this down a little, up a little bit. There we go. We're bringing back a lot of detail into the image this way. For slope, we'll raise that a bit toward the lighter side as well. And then offset, I'm going to just leave alone. And you can play with the factor here, like how much this color balance correction is playing into the image. But I mean, I like what I did. Maybe I'll tone it back just a little bit. And we have our color correction, right? So we plug that into here. You see that's the final result. I want to actually cut back the saturation that I did. Things are looking too blue now. So maybe just keep the master at 1. And then the shadows go to 1.2. And the midtone go to 1.1. Here we are. And the contrast, now I brought it up, I might just be backtracking here. Yeah, I'm going to reduce the contrast back to the original. So those are the two main notes. A bit more photorealism here, a bit of like photo editing before you export your render out. You can have Blender do some of the work to each render that you put through. So to compare, that is, the edited, the color balance, and color correction, and here is the original, right? So much more washed out. Here we're bringing back some life into the image, and you could, tweak this as much as you want, but the real subtle changes that you do, the better. It's, you gotta exaggerate things to see what they do, but then I feel like you exaggerate them, then you bring them to what they think they should be, and then you gotta lower it even less because all the edits that you end up doing in that process amount to a lot, and then it's kind of exaggerated at the end, maybe more than it should be. So that's just, I mean, at least for how I approach things, I tend to find that. I mean, just to show you some cool things that we have going on here, we have different filters. So this is really the main thing that I'll do is color balance, color contrast, but then depending on the scene, you can start doing some more interesting things. Like if I wanted to add glare, if I plug this in between, and I hit Control-Shift-Click to see what glare is doing, you see it's picking up on these highlights. All right, that's the cool thing about doing this in Blender too, is the fact that it knows the 3D model. So you're not just, like in Photoshop, you gotta pick where the highlights are and which objects would, create that glare. Whereas Blender knows, because it made the image from 3D objects, so it saves you also some time with that. And you can mess with the settings for your different filters. See what it is that you're getting a difference. So there actually seems like I got rid of it. Right, the compositor tends to be a bit slower than I estimated, so you might want to give it some time to calculate. And the point of the mixer, for example, see like if you put it all the way to 1, it's like just the glare, and then at -1, it's like just the image. At 0, you get like an in-between. But what you could do here to also kind of control this a bit more is if you put no mix, and then you bring up a mix node at the end, we can mix our image with the glare, right? So that was just the glare from the original image. We could be picking up the glare from the color corrected version, but we'd probably be getting less accurate visual information. So we can use the mix node to mix, this thread that has the color correction and mix it with the glare. We can set the glare to screen, right? So it has like blend modes in here too. And it sometimes works opposite than what you might think with the order of, no, it seems like these are mixing just fine together. But for certain nodes, it's important which one goes above, which one goes below. And for the factor, we can turn down the intensity of that mix. We're actually getting an area blowing up here into pure black, which is not good. So we want to turn down the mix value beforehand. Or switch from screen to lighten. Yeah. Instead of screen, I'll go to lighten. That took care of that black region right there. That was in the middle of our highlight. Okay. And that glare effect is way too strong. So I guess the factor will determine which one's being overlaid to which layer. So there we go. That combination worked for adding a little glare to the object. We could do, we do so much. There's sunbeams, there's directional blur, there's denoising, there's pixelating. That'd be cool. Just pixelate. I got no options. I never use them before. Okay. It's just pixelate. I have used sunbeams, so you can have, kind of, if I had a sun, it would look better for this scene, but just to show you, we can increase the ray length. We can put a location for where the sunbeams would be coming through. So it kind of fakes, highlights created by the sun like that. But again, it's not really applicable to this scene here. Because you have to pick a light source, and it really would only work if the light source is somewhere in the image, but our main light source is here off the camera. Although I guess I could pretend like the top light is creating these, decrease the ray length, and then, yeah, use the mixer node, and copy paste the mixer node to mix the lightened version with the sunbeam version. And then tweak how much sunbeams we're getting. But yeah, I'm not liking any of that. I might keep the glare, but not the sunbeam. Okay, so with that, all is said and done. If I go into my layout now, You see here we have the original render setting. I don't know, don't think stereoscopy is going to work for me still. Yep, still experiencing that glitch, which is annoying. You know what I'm thinking is the default camera might have been the issue. I'm going to test something out real quick. If it works great. If not, I'll have to keep researching why it is I'm experiencing this. So let's say I call this camera R. I'm going to create a new camera as well with the and I remove all these cameras as stereoscopy cameras. So I just have my left and right camera. We can eliminate all these cameras. Oop. Nope, I don't think it's still not working. Camera F is not a multi-view camera. I don't even have it set as a multi-view camera. Yep, still going through that glitch. Anywho, what we're going to see now is the render start to be produced. Stereoscopy. We're going to do our front view. And we're going to see here that once it's done rendering all the panels, it's going to kick in with all our composite edits. So this is cool too, because if you're doing an animation, you can pre-edit your animation, right? You don't have to like do all that video editing to after you put all your frames together and done all that work, and then you catch something that's wrong with your animation as you're editing it. You have to go back and re-render and then re-edit. And in this case, you can start putting in some some edits in your render edits. Anywho, my ball position isn't great. They look very inconsistent with their distance to the ground. But I was moving fast, and boom, there we see the. We can switch back up here, go to the normal layer, or we can go to the combined layer. Composite layer, sorry. So the composite or the combined, which is, I guess, all the lighting tricks or all the lighting scenes. In our composite, we see here, I actually like what the glare is doing for me here because it's kind of, I mean, it's too powerful. I tone it down, but it's breaking up the fact that you see the top light above, the reflection of the light above, and the empty background happening everywhere else. The cool thing about the way we set up the wall texture too is if I go ahead and save this as blue, I can have that texture look just as good by clicking on it, going over here to my material, and just changing the base color. So I made it a deep orange or yellow, right? Still looking good. And it really is a testament to the lighting if multiple colors can look good under that same light. Especially like, we do like a gray. Yeah. Wow, it looks like a black and white photo just by making the whole background gray. I like the teal color. What we'll do now is I'll hide the spheres. Like I can never call it off, right? But the real, the real value of this file is, where are the spheres? I don't see them. The real value of this file is being able to use it as a base, right? To be able to bring in anything else. So if I were to do file, append, so that I can link another object, another file, I can go to my cars that I'm working on, go to the single car model, this one. And it brought out more than I meant to, but we'll find the cars. We'll move them into the box. And I mean, the cars are too large to fit on the box. Because it is a linked file, I can't really edit the cars. If you, for whatever reason, want to keep the true size of whatever it is that you're bringing in, uh, you can scale, move all your cameras, scale your cyc wall, but for the sake of efficiency and because I don't care about keeping the original size of the object, I will just place my car. And now that I've placed my car, I want to move my camera down and hit tab on my wall, select my 3 lines here, and then G or E? I want to hit E. I'll hit E to extrude that wall towards the camera until I fill out that floor. If I go back to the camera view, oh, it looks like E messed up my bevel. Looks like extruding messed up my bevel. So I guess I want to keep it and just hit GX. It is distorting my texture a little bit. That's because I didn't use a texture node here. But that's simple, actually. Should have brought this up. If we go to preferences, we start editing these things, and we want to keep those things consistent. We can go into add-ons, search for Node Wrangler, and you do Control T on your texture, so that you can then mess with how that texture is showing up. So we can mess the scale of it. You can see how like we're resizing it there. Although you have to make sure that you plug it to all your vector nodes for each one of your textures, so that they all edit together. Right, so you can see it stretching there. Kind of fit the shape more. I lost my bevel. I'm not sure why. Messing with the geometry like that shouldn't have done that. But I will undo so I can bring that bevel back. And again, the way we set up that cube in the beginning is so that if I scale it up, it keeps that center. Right, so moving the walls away, probably better for the car, not to feel so boxed in. And yeah, we can basically now bring in any object into the origin and have it render out in our scene. And we can just switch them out. Cool. I'll try a orange one for this one. And would have to tweak my lights. No, it's all right. We'll hit render. And as that renders, I will say my goodbyes. Thanks for tuning in. This one was a lot compressed into a reasonable amount of time, but it really was an overview, really doing like minimum effort for maximum output. I hid my fears, but I didn't hide them from the render. But whatever, that's an interesting result. And yeah, for the next stream, I will continue to work on these Blender files because, as I said earlier at the beginning of this live stream, I am looking to set some standard assets to be using and working on throughout this project. So I feel like, yeah, after having tested the different methods, the different formats that I'm doing for this live stream, and I've done a good push on what the comic book is going to look like, it's time to take a step back and actually start, tweaking with some actual base files that I can always refer back to. I can always use them to start from something, not never from scratch. And yeah, it's basically what the upcoming streams are. So back to fundamentals a little bit. It's been a little all over the place, multidisciplinary, definitely doing 3D illustration, writing, thought process a little bit, and it's still going to be some variety. But rather than diving so deep in each topic, going back a bit to the fundamentals and really building this from the ground up, now that I've sort of vetted what the process can look like and what techniques I should be working with. But yeah, that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you on the next